I vividly recall the day our ethar professor, Dr. Zarn, asked that profound question in class. His leathery skin glistened under the dim lights, and his 3 slender tongues flicked out from his wide mouth, touching the edges of his circular eyes, a clear sign of discomfort, especially when surrounded by so many students. As a budding xenologist, I recognized this behavior immediately. The AAR were solitary by nature, often preferring the quiet solace of their research chambers to the bustling crowds. And yet, here he was, an anomaly among his kind, teaching a diverse group of young scholars from every corner of the galaxy. But what truly set him apart wasn't just his species-defying career path, it was his unparalleled understanding of other races, especially the one we were about to study in depth. "What is the meaning of unity?" he asked, his voice resonating through the silent hall. It was a question that had ignited entire fields of study, and we knew its roots traced back to one peculiar race, Homo sapiens, or as they called themselves, humans. No one dared to answer immediately. We, an assembly of claws, tentacles, and wings, fumbled through our digital notes, trying to grasp the concept in his question. But the echoes of his words seemed to bounce off the walls, leaving us in the same state of bewilderment. Unlike most professors at the Galactic University, Dr. Zarn conducted his classes in person, a practice nearly extinct in this age of holoconferencing and neural uploads. He insisted on this method, arguing that the physical presence of beings, the subtle cues in body language, and the unspoken emotions in the air were essential for true learning. It was a belief that was slowly influencing other instructors, and many of us were beginning to see its value. "What is the essence of family?" he followed up, his serpentine tongues flicking in rhythm. Our frantic searches intensified. Beside me, Trill, an ion with iridescent scales, hurriedly tapped on his biodigital assistant, his slime-coated fingers leaving trails on the screen. Before I could muster a response, a small hand shot up, a delicate appendage belonging to Chirich, an aven scholar whose species, the Lepier, were known for their keen intellect despite their diminutive size. Family, a biological classification containing various subclassifications, Chirich recited with precision. He was always quick, always accurate, and often outshone the rest of us, much to my frustration. Dr. Zarn shook his head slowly, each of his tongues tasting the air as he prepared to speak. "No, that is the definition, but not the meaning." I hesitated, my fur-covered arm halfway raised. The answer wasn't in our texts, and I knew it. So I spoke, my elongated jaw parting as my voice reverberated through the chamber. "Professor, the books don't offer any other definitions. Could you clarify what you mean?" Dr. Zarn paused, then did something none of us expected. He emitted a sound, a strange staccato noise that I later learned was his attempt at mimicking human laughter. The room fell into a hushed silence as a hologram flickered to life behind him. On the screen appeared a creature like none we'd seen before, bipedal, with a mop of fur atop its head, small lips, and only 2 limbs for grasping. "This," Dr. Zarn said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of research, "is the species from which you will learn the true meaning of those questions. If you can understand humans, you can understand any species. In my 250 cycles of study, I have never encountered a species more complex, more contradictory, or more capable of redefining what we know about unity and family." A collective gasp rippled through the classroom, clicks, chirps, and hums from the various species present. It seemed impossible, absurd even, that such a fragile-looking species could be so influential. They form bonds with inanimate objects, create relationships with fictional characters, and will adopt orphans of any species as if they were their own, Dr. Zarn continued. They can domesticate predators, and even those that would naturally prey on them. If a human is rejected by their kin, they find new family. If one loses everything, they rebuild from nothing. This ability to connect, to form communities, is unparalleled. The room was now electric with disbelief and fascination. Could this really be true? Could humans, these seemingly weak creatures, truly be the apex beings of their world and potentially beyond? "I was there," Dr. Zarn declared, his eyes narrowing with intensity. "I witnessed a human starship respond to a distress call from my own people, sacrificing itself to save us from annihilation, a suicide run, all for the sake of strangers. No other species would do such a thing. We exchanged glances, a mix of admiration and skepticism coloring our thoughts. Self-sacrifice for another species was unheard of, yet Dr. Zarn spoke with such conviction that it was impossible to doubt him entirely. For 50 years, he said, you will immerse yourselves in their culture. You will live among them, learn their ways, and in doing so, you will discover the meaning of unity, of family, in ways you never imagined. And when you return, you will carry that knowledge to your home worlds, sparking a change that will ripple through the galaxy. I felt a surge of anticipation. 50 years seemed like a long time, but something about Dr. Zarn's words filled me with a sense of purpose. Little did I know, those years would be the most enlightening of my life. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Kira, of the Demone race. We are a species covered in sleek fur, with 4 triangular ears perched atop our heads and long, muscular tails. Our legs are built for both running on all fours and walking upright. My fur is a mix of silvery gray and deep blue, if that helps you imagine what I look like. If this ever gets made into a holovid, I just hope they choose an actor who does me justice and doesn't make me look too much like one of those human canines. The journey to the human sector was a long one, spanning several months even on our fastest ships. Some of my classmates opted out of the trip, fearful of the unknown or simply unwilling to travel so far. I couldn't understand them. To me, this was an opportunity like no other, a chance to explore the most enigmatic species in the galaxy. Dr. Zarn prepared us well for what lay ahead. We studied human entertainment, mythology, music, and social conventions, all tailored to the region where we would be staying. I was struck by how diverse and intense their culture was. They had entire genres dedicated to horror, thriving on the thrill of fear, an emotion most other species avoided at all costs. But to humans, fear was something to be embraced, challenged, and ultimately overcome. This, Dr. Zarn explained, was part of what made humans so formidable, their ability to face the unknown, to confront their deepest fears, and to push beyond their limits was unmatched. They defined themselves by their resilience, their determination to survive and thrive in the face of adversity. This was the essence of their strength. 2 months into our journey, we encountered our first human patrol. Their vessels were immense, bristling with weapons that could obliterate entire fleets. Yet despite their fearsome appearance, the humans welcomed us aboard with open arms, or so it seemed. Dr. Zarn chose a small group of us to accompany him on the human ship, eager to get a first-hand look at their society before we reached their home world. The ship was a marvel of human engineering, designed not just for war but for living. Families, complete with children and elders, lived aboard, forming small communities that thrived even in the cold vacuum of space. This was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Our first encounter with the human crew was both fascinating and unnerving. The human who greeted us was a tall female with dark hair and piercing eyes. She introduced herself as Captain Riley and invited us to tour the ship. The vessel's interior was a labyrinth of corridors, each one lined with doors leading to various living quarters, training rooms, and communal areas. As we ventured deeper into the ship, we were introduced to something I hadn't anticipated, a human invention that catered to their love of speed and adrenaline. A sleek hovercraft awaited us in one of the larger corridors, its design unlike anything we had back home. The driver, a young woman with a wild grin, strapped herself into the center seat, surrounded by monitors that displayed a dizzying array of data. "Hold on tight," she called out, her voice filled with excitement. Before we could react, the hovercraft shot forward with a burst of speed that nearly tore the fur from my body. The wind whipped past us, and the walls of the corridor became a blur as we raced along the green-lit track that wound its way through the ship. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of terror and exhilaration flooding my senses. The driver, whom I later learned was a member of the ship's elite racing team, expertly navigated the twists and turns of the track, her body moving in perfect sync with the hovercraft. I clung to my seat, trying to process the sheer intensity of the experience. This was unlike anything I had ever known, dangerous, thrilling, and utterly human. By the time we screeched to a halt, my mind was spinning, but one thing was clear: I had just glimpsed a fragment of the human spirit, a species that embraced risk, speed, and the unknown with a fervor that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. As we disembarked from the hover,